The twin suns hung low over Prime's dusty skyline, bleeding the streets in gold and crimson. The air shimmered with heat. The smell of roasted meat from the food stalls mixed with the tang of burnt metal drifting from the shipyards. Jack hated this part of the city. Too many eyes followed a human here, some with curiosity, most with suspicion, a few with the kind of hunger he recognized from war, predators sizing up prey. But he wasn't here for sightseeing. He had a job: deliver an old hyperdrive coil to a shady merchant who paid in hard currency instead of the interstellar credit, chips the Union loved to devalue every few months. Jack's boots crunched on the gravel-strewn path as he approached Semporium, a building more rust than metal. Its flickering hollow sign sputtered the name in 4 alien languages, none of them friendly. The door slid open with a reluctant hiss. Inside, the air was cooler but thick with the smell of spice smoke. Metal shelves leaned under the weight of exotic goods, crates of bluestone ore, canisters of plasma gel, strange bone sculptures that seemed to twitch when you looked at them too long. Behind the counter sat a thin, tall, all-wiry muscle and dark green skin with patterns like cracked glass. His eyes were amber, sharp, and never still. Jack had dealt with him before, was dangerous, but he paid well. Said, his voice smooth but edged like a blade, "You have my coil." Jack lifted the heavy satchel and set it on the counter with a metallic thud. Grade 3 hyperdrive coil, refurbished and tuned, should run cleaner than the factory build. His eyes narrowed with a flicker of interest. "You always bring quality, and yet you look like a man who hasn't eaten a proper meal in days." Jack smirked. "I don't work for charity." Opened the satchel, running long fingers over the coil. He nodded once. "Acceptable, I will pay as agreed." Jack leaned on the counter. "Good, let's—" A voice interrupted from the back room, loud, sharp, and desperate. "No, you can't do this." Jack froze. The voice was feminine, young. Glanced toward the sound, his amber eyes flickering with something unreadable. "A private matter," he said. The curtain behind the counter parted. An alien girl stepped out, or rather was pushed out by a smaller, hunched male. She was unlike most Jack had seen. Her skin was a paler green, her markings faint, almost washed out. One leg was mechanical, sleek but battered, clearly a replacement made in haste. Her dark eyes darted between Jack and— "Father, please," she said in. Jack didn't understand the words, but the desperation in her tone was universal. Waved a dismissive hand. "Enough, the wager was lost, the rules are clear." The hunched male shoved her forward again. She stumbled, her metal leg clanging on the floor. Jack straightened. "What's going on here?" His gaze sharpened. "None of your concern, human." "I'm making it my concern." Jack's voice dropped, the old soldier in him surfacing. Smiled thinly. "A game was played, a debt was owed. I wagered my daughter's service for 1 cycle, I lost." Jack's stomach turned. "Service." Tilted his head. "To you." The words hit Jack like a gut punch. "Me." Slid a small data slate across the counter. "You won the wager." Jack blinked. "I didn't place any wager." "Your name was put forward as the neutral party. The other player accepted. The arbiter confirmed. In law, a wager stands, no matter how absurd the outcome." Jack stared at the girl. She looked barely into her 20s in human terms, thin, cautious, but there was fire in her eyes. "This is insane," Jack said. His voice grew colder. "Rules are rules. If you refuse, you insult my honor and my clan. You know what happens then." Jack did know. They had a simple way of settling dishonor with blood. And in this city, no one would care if a human vanished in an alley. The girl met his eyes. "Please, don't let him send me to the other one." Her accent was thick, but her words were clear. Jack's gut twisted. He didn't like being manipulated, but he also didn't like the thought of her going wherever the other one was. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Sira." Tapped the counter. "The decision." Jack's mind raced. Taking her in meant trouble. Law might bind them, but humans had no such protections here. He'd be responsible for her, her safety, her food, her shelter. And whatever she'd done to get into this mess would become his problem. But refusing, that meant crossing, and had friends in the underworld that Jack didn't want as enemies. Jack exhaled slowly. "Fine, she comes with me, 1 cycle, then she's free." Smile was thin and predatory. "Agreed." Sira's shoulders sagged with relief, but Jack noticed the flicker of guilt in her eyes. She knew something she wasn't saying. Slid the coil's payment across the counter. Enjoy your winnings and be careful, some debts follow you home. They left the Emporium together. The suns were dipping lower, casting long shadows across the cracked streets. Jack kept his pace slow so Sierra could keep up with her mechanical leg. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Jack asked. She stared at the ground. "You wouldn't believe me." "Try me." She hesitated. "My father didn't just lose a bet, he lost on purpose." Jack stopped walking. "Why?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because the one he was betting against wanted me dead." Jack's skin prickled. "And now that you're with me." She looked up, her dark eyes full of fear. "They'll come after you instead." A sudden movement in the alley ahead caught Jack's eye. Two tall figures stepped into the street, their silhouettes jagged in the dying light. Sierra's grip tightened on his sleeve. "It's them." The figures stepped out of the shadows and into the dying light. Both were a species built like slabs of muscle and bone, their heads low and forward like predatory animals. Their skin shimmered faintly, a natural armor that caught the sun in metallic flecks. One carried a short, wide-bladed weapon strapped to his forearm. The other had something worse, a shock rifle slung low, already humming with a dangerous charge. Sierra's grip on Jack's sleeve tightened until he could feel her trembling. "They're not here to talk," she whispered. Jack had already figured that out. His gaze flicked up and down the street. Empty, too empty. The food stall across from them was abandoned, its steam trays still hissing. A stray wind pushed dust between his boots. Whoever these two were, they'd cleared the street before stepping out. The bigger called out in rough Union standard. "Human, step aside. The girl comes with us." Jack's hand hovered near the small, worn blaster on his hip. "Not happening." The smaller one laughed, the sound like metal scraping stone. "Do you even know who you're protecting?" "No," Jack said, "but I know who I'm not handing over to street thugs." The bigger growled low. "You've made a bad choice." They started forward. Jack moved fast. He shoved Sierra behind him, then stepped sideways toward a narrow service alley between two buildings. He didn't wait for them to catch up. "Move." Sierra stumbled, her prosthetic leg clicking sharply against the uneven ground, but she kept pace. The alley was dark and narrow, lit only by the flicker of an overhead cable that sparked now and then. Behind them came heavy footsteps, faster now. Jack took a sharp turn left, ducking under a hanging pipe. He could hear the hum of the rifle charging up. A blast sizzled past his head, slamming into the wall ahead. The impact sprayed shards of glowing stone, the heat searing his cheek. Sierra gasped, but Jack didn't slow. "Keep moving, don't stop." They burst out into a wider side street, full of noise and movement. Vendors shouting over each other, customers arguing prices, carts piled with alien fruit that oozed sweet-smelling nectar. Jack grabbed the nearest cart and shoved it into the street, toppling it in the path of the pursuing. Purple fruit splattered across the ground, sticky and slippery. The bigger one skidded, slamming into his partner. Jack yanked Sierra toward a stairwell that led up to a narrow walkway between buildings. They took the steps two at a time. The prosthetic leg whined with each movement, but Sierra didn't complain. Halfway up, she said between breaths, "You don't have to do this." Jack glanced back at her. "Yeah, I do." They reached the top. The walkway was barely wide enough for two people, lined with makeshift tarps that flapped in the wind. Below, the shoved through the market chaos, scanning upward. "Stay low," Jack muttered. They crouched and moved quickly along the walkway until Jack spotted what he needed, a maintenance ladder leading to the roof of a low warehouse. They climbed. The roof was flat, covered in solar panels and old ventilation units. From here, Jack could see the sprawl of Prime, the endless stretch of rust-colored rooftops, the glowing spires of the upper districts in the distance, the haze from the shipyards drifting like smoke over everything. Sierra sank to the roof, breathing hard. Her mechanical leg hissed, a small panel flashing amber. "Overheated," she said. "It needs time to cool." Jack scanned the streets below. They were still in the market, but they wouldn't stay there long. "We can't wait too long." Sierra looked at him, her expression caught between fear and guilt. "You don't understand. They won't stop, not until one of us is dead." Jack crouched in front of her. "Then tell me why." She hesitated, then reached down and tapped the side of her mechanical leg. A small hatch popped open, revealing a compartment barely big enough for a palm-sized device. She pulled it out. It was a black hexagonal data core, faint blue light pulsing from its center. "This," she said, "is what they want." Jack frowned. "What is it?" "A vault key," she whispered. "It opens something my father was supposed to deliver to them. He refused. Now they think killing me is the easiest way to get it." Jack stared at the device. "And why didn't you just hand it over?" "Because," Sierra said, "if they open the vault, a lot of people die." The wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of boots on metal. Jack looked toward the far end of the roof. 2 more shapes had appeared, climbing up from another building. "Guess your friends called for backup," he muttered. Sierra's grip on the data core tightened. "They're not my friends." Jack's mind was already running through options. Fight, risky, run, limited exits, hide, possible if he could make them look the wrong way first. The 2 new figures moved quickly, rifles slung and ready. Jack reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a small sphere, a smoke charge from his old EDF days. He rolled it between his fingers, feeling the worn casing. He looked at Sierra. "When this goes off, we move. You follow exactly where I go. No hero moves, no hesitation. Got it?" She nodded. The figures closed in, steps quick and deliberate. Jack pulled the pin. The charge hissed, then erupted in a billowing cloud of dense gray smoke, swallowing the roof in seconds. Jack grabbed Sierra's arm. "Now." They bolted toward the far side, vanishing into the smoke. Shots cracked behind them, sizzling into solar panels. Jack reached the edge of the roof and spotted a low awning below. "We're jumping." Sierra's eyes widened. "You're insane." "Probably." They leapt together. The awning groaned under their weight before tearing free, sending them crashing into a pile of crates below. Pain exploded in Jack's shoulder, but he forced himself up. Sierra groaned beside him, clutching her leg. They staggered into another alley. Somewhere behind them, the shouted orders, their voices echoing off the metal walls. Jack rounded a corner, only to stop dead. Standing at the alley's end was a third, taller than the others, his armor engraved with blood-red patterns. He held a long, curved blade in one hand, and Sierra's name etched into the metal. The at the alley's end didn't move. He just stood there, letting the sunset light slide across the grooves of his armor, the red engravings glowing like fresh cuts. His eyes, deep yellow, unblinking, locked on Sierra. Jack raised his blaster. "Back up now." The tilted his head slightly, as if studying an insect that had spoken. When he spoke, his voice was low and deliberate. "You're the human," he said, "the one who took what was mine." Jack's grip tightened. "She's not yours." This gaze never left Sierra. "Her father promised her life to me as payment. She should have died by my hand. You've delayed that, but you haven't stopped it." Sierra's mechanical leg whined as she stepped back. "Jack, he's called. My father didn't just lose a bet to him. He's the one I told you about." Jack's stomach sank. "The one who wanted you dead." His lips curled in what might have been a smile. "She carries the key. I will take it after I take her head." Jack shifted slightly, putting himself between them. "You're going to have to go through me first." The big alien's expression didn't change. "That is the plan." And then he moved, faster than something that size should be able to. The curved blade came in low and fast. Jack barely got his blaster up in time, the strike glancing off the weapon's casing with a metallic ring that jolted his arm. He fired point-blank, but twisted away, the shot sizzling harmlessly into the wall. Jack stepped back, trying to keep space between them. "Run," he barked at Sierra. She hesitated, then limped toward the side of the alley. Saw the movement. With a single, vicious backhand, he sent Jack stumbling into a stack of rusted barrels. The crash rang through the alley like a gunshot. By the time Jack scrambled back up, was advancing on Sierra, the blade lifting. "Hey!" Jack's shout was half fury, half desperation. He grabbed the nearest thing, a metal pipe from the ground, and hurled it. It clanged against his shoulder, barely slowing him, but enough to make him turn his head. Jack charged. They collided hard, Jack's shoulder slamming into his chest plate. It was like hitting a wall. Pain shot through Jack's already battered shoulder, but he kept pushing, forcing back a step. Snarled and shoved him away. "You fight well for a prey species." Jack spat blood. You talk too much. The lunged again, the blade flashing. Jack barely avoiding the strike and grabbed's wrist. For a moment they grappled, each straining against the other. Sierra's voice rang out, "Jack, roof." Jack glanced up. An old fire escape ladder hung just overhead, loose bolts barely holding it in place. He shoved back just enough to grab the ladder and yank hard. Metal screamed as it came down, slamming into the shoulder and staggering him. "Move," Jack shouted. He and Sierra bolted past him, turning into another maze of side streets. The smell of oil and smoke clung to the air as they weaved through the narrow paths. Behind them roared the sound rattling Jack's teeth. It wasn't just anger, it was promise. They didn't stop until the streets opened into the lower docks, a tangle of landing pads, cargo lifts, and stacked freight containers. Sierra bent over, clutching her leg. The amber light on the prosthetic was blinking faster now. "It's overheating again. I can't keep running like this." Jack scanned the area. The docks were busy, but not busy enough. Too many open spaces for someone like to close the gap fast. He spotted a half-open container nearby. In there. They slipped inside. The container smelled of stale air and metal. Old cargo crates lined the walls, dust thick on every surface. Jack eased the door closed until only a sliver of light remained. Sierra leaned against a crate, breathing hard. "He's not going to stop, Jack. You don't understand what he is." "Enlighten me." She swallowed hard. The hunters aren't just killers. They're bound by a blood oath. Once they mark someone, they hunt until they succeed or they die. My father, he gave my name in a wager. He knew what that meant. Jack felt a cold knot settle in his gut. "So even if we leave the city, he'll follow across worlds if he has to." Jack rubbed a hand over his face. "Great, just great." Before either of them could say more, heavy footsteps echoed outside the container. Slow, measured. Jack motioned for Sierra to stay quiet. He peered through the sliver of light in the door. Was there, moving between the stacks of cargo like a predator stalking through tall grass. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. He knew they were trapped in the docks. Jack's mind raced. They needed a way out, but not the obvious paths. If expected them to run for a ship, that's exactly what they couldn't do. Then he saw it, a maintenance lift halfway hidden behind a fuel tower. It led down to a network of tunnels and storage bays under the city. Risky, but better than waiting to be cornered here. He turned to Sierra. "When I give the signal, we make for that lift, fast." She nodded, clutching the data core tight. Jack counted the seconds, watching's path. When the hunter stepped behind a stack of freight, Jack pushed the container door open and bolted. Sierra was right behind him, her leg clicking with every step. They were halfway to the lift when a deep voice cut through the air. Jack didn't stop, but he glanced back and saw standing in the open, the curved blade raised in a mock salute. "You can run," called, "but I will carve your name next to hers." Jack slammed his hand on the lift controls. The platform dropped, lowering them into darkness. Sierra's breathing was sharp, fast. "Though are they safe?" Jack gave a humorless laugh. "Not even close." The lift clunked to a stop in the dim glow of the tunnels below. The air was cooler here, thick with the smell of rust and old oil. Somewhere in the shadows, machinery whirred to life. A low, mechanical growl echoed through the dark. Sierra's voice trembled. "Jack, we're not alone down here." The stretched out like the skeleton of a forgotten city. Steel beams rising like ribs, catwalks crisscrossing above, and massive storage tanks looming in the gloom. Dim striplights buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow light that barely reached the floor. Jack's boots crunched over gravel and bits of broken machinery. The air was cooler here but damp, carrying the tang of rust and stale oil. The sound came again, low, mechanical, and too rhythmic to be random. Something was moving toward them. Sierra clutched the data core. "That's not." "No," Jack said quietly, scanning the shadows. "Might be worse." He motioned for her to follow and moved deeper into the maze of steel and shadow, keeping close to the walls. His eyes flicked constantly, checking the high walkways and the spaces between the tanks. A faint red light swept across the far wall, slow, deliberate. Jack recognized it instantly. Damn it, a patrol drone. The thing emerged from behind a column, its 6 spidery legs clanging softly against the metal floor. The main body was a sphere of armored plating, bristling with antennas and sensor lenses. A pair of small rotary cannons hung beneath it, tracking slowly left and right. Sierra whispered, "Why's it here?" "Probably guarding something or someone." Jack glanced at her. "And now us." The drone paused, its sensors sweeping the area. The red light passed over them, lingering for a heartbeat too long. Then it let out a sharp electronic chirp. "Run," Jack said. The drone's guns spun up with a high-pitched whine. They bolted, the clatter of Sierra's prosthetic leg mixing with the rising chatter of gunfire. Sparks burst from the floor at their heels as the drone's shots chewed into the metal. Jack grabbed her arm and pulled her around the side of a massive tank. The drone's footsteps clanged closer, its sensors sweeping the corner. Jack's eyes darted to the maintenance ladder on the tank's side. Up. They climbed fast, the metal rungs vibrating under the impacts of stray rounds. At the top, a narrow catwalk ran along the tank's rim, leading to another section of the... They sprinted across, the catwalk swaying under their weight. Halfway across, a shadow moved ahead of them. Another drone, smaller but faster, dropping down from an overhead beam. Jack swore under his breath, "They're hurting us." Sierra's voice was tight. "To where?" Jack didn't have an answer, because the smaller drone lunged, stabbing a taser-like prod at him. He ducked, grabbing the prod's shaft and wrenching it sideways. The drone buzzed angrily, twisting to recover, but Jack slammed his boot into one of its legs, sending it sprawling. "Go," he shouted. They reached the far end of the catwalk and ducked through a gap in the steel wall, emerging into a wider chamber. Here, the ceiling opened up high above them, lit by shafts of pale light filtering through cracks in the deck plates overhead. At the center of the chamber sat a ship, or what was left of one. It was old, human-made by the look of it, half buried under decades of dust and scrap. The hull plating was pitted and patched with mismatched panels from a dozen different vessels, but Jack recognized the design immediately. "That's an EDF scout frigate," he said slowly. Sierra tilted her head. "Yours?" "No," Jack said, moving closer, "but I flew one just like it in the campaign." The sight of it stirred something in him, memories of a younger man in cleaner armor, fighting battles for causes he still believed in. But that was a lifetime ago. They approached the frigate's main hatch. It was sealed, but the control panel still had power. Jack ran his fingers over the worn keys, muscle memory kicking in. Behind them, the sound of the larger drone echoed closer. "Hurry," Sierra urged. Jack keyed in the old EDF override codes. The panel beeped twice, then flashed green. With a groan of hydraulics, the hatch slid open, stale air spilling out. They scrambled inside. The interior was dark, the air thick with the smell of metal and dust. Jack sealed the hatch just as the heavy clang of the drone's legs reached the outer hull. They stood in the narrow entryway, both breathing hard. The flicker of emergency lights traced faint red along the walls. Sierra looked at him. "So, what now?" Jack tapped the wall panel. The interior lights flickered weakly to life, revealing a cockpit choked with dust and an engine room half stripped of parts. "Now, we see if this thing can move." They made their way to the cockpit. Jack slid into the pilot's seat, the cushions brittle under his weight. His hands moved over the controls, wiping dust from the screens. The main power readout was dead, but auxiliary systems still hummed faintly. "This thing's half alive," he muttered. "Might be enough to..." A metallic boom shook the hull. Sierra's eyes widened. That wasn't the drone. Jack's stomach sank. No, that was heavier. He pulled up the external cameras. The grainy feed flickered before locking onto an image. Standing on the floor, his curved blade in one hand, the other hand resting on the hull like he'd just claimed it. Next to him, the wreckage of the larger drone lay in a heap. Jack muttered, "Great, he's faster than I thought." Looked up at the camera, meeting Jack's gaze through the lens. He didn't speak, but he didn't have to. The slow, deliberate smile said it all. Sierra whispered, "He's going to get in." Jack was already on his feet, moving toward the engine room. "Not if I can help it." He rounded the corner and stopped. Someone was already there. A man, human, lean, with sharp features and an oil-stained jacket. He was leaning casually against the engine housing, flipping a spanner in one hand like he'd been waiting for them. "About time you showed up," the stranger said. "We need to talk about your friend out there." Jack froze, one hand instinctively going toward his blaster. The stranger didn't flinch. He just kept lazily flipping the spanner, his eyes never leaving Jack's. "Easy," the man said. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be cooling on the floor already." Jack didn't relax. "You're human, not many of us down here." "Not many of us anywhere on Prime," the stranger said. "That's why I noticed you and your passenger." His gaze flicked toward Sierra, who hovered in the doorway, her fingers tightening on the data core. Jack stepped slightly in front of her. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "Name, Stray, used to be EDF like you. You were in the campaign, right?" Jack's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago." Shrugged. "War's the only reason any of us are still breathing, or the reason we're all half dead. Depends on how you look at it." Sierra's voice was wary. "You said you know about." Smirk faded. He tapped the spanner lightly against the engine housing. "Yeah, he's not just some bounty hound. He's working for the Syndicate, specifically the Blood Accord." Jack frowned. "Sounds like bad news." "It is," said flatly. "The Blood Accord doesn't take jobs for money. They take jobs for balance, old scores, and your friend here," he nodded at Sierra. "She's the center of one." Sierra's eyes hardened. "My father's score, not mine." Tilted his head. "Blood doesn't care whose hands made the mess. It follows the name, and he's the kind who won't stop until it's settled." Jack folded his arms. "You seem awful calm about all this. You hiding something?" Smirk returned, but it was thinner now. "Let's just say I've dealt with before, got out alive, barely, which means I know how he thinks, and I know how to make him back off." Sierra took a step forward. "Then tell us." Leaned closer, lowering his voice. "The only way to break a Blood Accord hunt is to settle the debt in a way the Accord accepts. Your father owed them something, something worth more than you kid, my guess. It's in the vault that key of yours opens." Jack glanced at Sierra. "What's in the vault?" She shook her head. "I don't know. Father never told me, just that it was dangerous." His grin was humorless. "Dangerous usually means valuable, and valuable means leverage. You open that vault before gets to it, maybe you can bargain your way out." Jack didn't like it. "Sounds like a setup." "It's a risk," admitted, "but it's the only one that doesn't end with you bleeding out in an alley." Before Jack could answer, a deep clang echoed through the frigate. The hull vibrated under their feet. Sierra's eyes went wide. "He's inside." His expression shifted, no more casual grin. "Then we're out of time." Jack moved to the cockpit, flicking switches. "Power's low, but maybe we can." The lights died. The hum of the auxiliary systems cut out, leaving them in darkness. A metallic voice echoed from the entryway. His voice. Sierra's breath caught, drew a compact pistol from under his jacket. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps moved down the corridor. The curved blade scraped lightly against the wall, sending a shiver up Jack's spine. Jack glanced at, "You said you knew how to make him back off. Now would be a good time." Smirked faintly. "I said maybe." Shadow filled the doorway to the cockpit, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "No more running," said. Jack's blaster was up, his pistol aimed, Sierra clutching the data core like it was her last breath. Then did something none of them expected. He lowered his blade and dropped a small object onto the floor. It rolled to a stop at Jack's feet. A severed comm device, its cracked screen displaying a frozen image of Sierra's father. The voice that came from it was faint but clear. "They've taken me. The vault, it's worse than you think. Don't let them open it." The feed cut out. Sierra's voice trembled. "He's alive." His gaze locked on her. "For now, but the Accord wants the vault open. Bring me the key or I finish what I started." Jack stepped forward. "You're saying you'll let him go." His expression was unreadable. "I'm saying you have one cycle. After that, I kill you both." He turned and walked out, his heavy footsteps fading into the silence hung in the cockpit. Sierra finally whispered, "Jack, if the vault is that dangerous." "We're not handing it over," Jack said. "We're going to get there first." Raised an eyebrow. "Then you're going to need me, because I know where it is." The lift from the rattled and groaned as it climbed toward the surface. Jack stood near the panel, one hand resting on his blaster. Sierra leaned against the wall, her prosthetic leg hissing softly, the amber warning light dim now but still there. lounged in the corner, arms folded, his eyes sharp despite his casual pose. When the lift doors opened, the smell hit them first: spice smoke, burning oil, and the faint stench of decay. Syndicate territory. The streets here were narrow and crooked, flanked by tall structures patched together from scrap and stolen ship parts. Neon signs flickered overhead, casting sickly colors over the crowds. Eyes followed them from shadowed doorways. "This is a bad idea," Jack muttered. Smirked. "It's the only idea we've got. Vaults in the Spire Warrens, deep inside Syndicate control. They've been using it as a stash for decades." Sierra's voice was low. "If they've been using it, then whatever my father hid there." Shook his head. "No, the inner chamber's still sealed. Your key's the only way in. That's why hasn't cracked it yet." Jack scanned the street. "Then we move fast before he realizes we're not bringing it to him." They weaved through the crowd, keeping to the edges. Every turn brought them deeper into the Warrens, down narrow alleys lit by hanging cables, past makeshift market stalls where merchants sold contraband in whispers. At one corner, a group of armed Syndicate guards lounged in front of a checkpoint. Their armor was mismatched, painted with jagged red symbols. Slowed, "We can't go through them, we go over." Jack followed his gaze upward. A rusted fire escape clung to the side of a building, leading to a network of catwalks that crisscrossed above the street. "After you," Jack said. They climbed quickly, the metal groaning under their weight. From above, the Warrens looked like a twisted web of metal and light, the streets below winding like a maze. They moved across the catwalks, staying low. But halfway across, Sierra's prosthetic leg snagged on a loose cable. She stumbled, and the clang of her foot hitting the grate echoed like a gunshot. Below, the guard's head snapped upward. Jack swore under his breath, "Move." Shouts rose from below. The guards started up the fire escape, weapons drawn. Led them toward a narrow bridge between buildings. Almost there. They reached the other side just as the first guard's helmet crested the top of the fire escape. Jack fired a warning shot into the grate near his head, sending him ducking back. They ducked into a darkened service tunnel that ran between structures. The air here was thick with dust, the only light coming from faint strips embedded in the walls. At the far end, a heavy door stood half buried in debris. A faded Syndicate sigil was painted across it. "This is it," said. Sierra stepped forward, pulling the data core from her leg compartment. The blue light pulsed faster now, as if sensing the lock. Jack stood beside her, scanning the shadows. "Make it quick." She knelt, slotting the core into a recessed port. The door's lights flickered, then shifted from red to green. With a deep groan, the locking mechanisms disengaged. The door slid open, revealing a narrow stairwell spiraling downward. The walls were lined with old cables and conduits, many long dead. They descended slowly, the air growing colder. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a wide chamber. The vault door stood at the far end, massive, circular, and covered in intricate engravings. It looked ancient, older than the Syndicate itself. Sierra stepped toward it, the data core still in hand. But before she could reach it, a voice echoed through the chamber. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd get here without me." They turned, stood at the top of the stairs, his curved blade in one hand. And he wasn't alone. Half a dozen Syndicate soldiers flanked him, their rifles aimed at Jack, Sierra, and... Jack raised his blaster slowly. "How'd you find us?" Smile was slow and cold. "You're not the only one with friends in the Warrens," he nodded toward, "and some of yours are better at bargaining than loyalty." Jack's stomach turned. He looked at, "You sold us out." Smirk was gone, his face unreadable. "Relax. I told him I'd bring you here. I didn't tell him I'd let him leave with the prize." Sierra's voice was sharp. "You played both sides." Shrugged. "Keeps me alive." Stepped forward. "Enough talking, the key now." Jack's eyes flicked to Sierra. She looked terrified, but also, for the first time, angry. Her grip on the data core tightened. "Jack," she whispered, "if I open it, you need to be ready." "Ready for what?" he asked. The vault's engravings began to glow faintly, reacting to the core. The blue light spread across the metal, pulsing like a heartbeat. Soldiers tensed, weapons up. Jack's instincts screamed that whatever was inside wasn't just treasure. The vault locks began to turn. The last lock clicked into place. The massive vault door shuddered, then began to rotate, the engravings glowing brighter with every turn. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, vibrating in Jack's chest. Sierra stepped back, eyes wide. It's waking up. Soldiers shifted nervously. Even himself tightened his grip on the curved blade. With a final groan, the vault door slid open. Cold blue light spilled out, washing over the chamber. Inside, instead of stacks of treasure or crates of weapons, a single object floated above a pedestal. An angular, obsidian-colored device the size of a man's torso, its surface traced with glowing runes that shifted when you looked at them. Jack frowned. What the hell is that? Sierra's voice was barely a whisper. My father called it the Pale Engine. Stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on it. I've heard the legends, a weapon from the first collapse, capable of silencing entire worlds. The soldiers muttered among themselves. Jack's stomach turned. That's not a treasure, that's a war crime in a box. Ignored him, give it to me. Sierra clutched the empty data core. No, my father hid it for a reason. His blade rose slightly. Then I'll take it over your corpse. Before he could move, stepped between them, pistol raised. Not so fast. If that thing goes to the syndicate, we all end up ash. His voice was calm but edged. You think you can stop me? Grinned without humor. No, but I can make sure none of us leaves here breathing. His other hand tapped something on a wrist control, and a faint beep echoed from the pedestal. Jack's eyes narrowed. You rigged it. Didn't look away from. Pressure triggered. Anyone tries to move the Pale Engine without my code, the whole chamber goes up. The soldiers shifted uneasily, glancing at each other. His gaze flicked from to Jack. Then we are at an impasse. Jack took a step towards Sierra. We're not leaving it here for anyone to use. There's another way. She met his eyes. Destroy it. He nodded. Destroy it. His voice was sharp. No, that's not your decision. Jack raised his blaster toward the Pale Engine. It is now. The moment froze, tensing to strike, soldiers lifting rifles, his finger hovering over his trigger. Then Sierra moved first. She limped forward, ignoring the weapons aimed at her, and placed both hands on the Pale Engine. The runes flared bright, the hum rising to a piercing whine. Jack shouted, Sierra. She looked back at him, eyes calm. My father said it would only answer to our blood. The glow became blinding. The air trembled. A wave of force rippled outward, knocking soldiers to the floor and shoving Jack back against the wall. Roared, trying to push forward, but the light intensified until everything went white. When Jack's vision cleared, the pedestal was empty. The Pale Engine was gone. Sierra stood in its place, the faint glow fading from her skin. She looked exhausted but alive. Stared at her blade, trembling. What did you do? She met his gaze. Sent it somewhere no one will ever find it, not even me. His jaw tightened. The Blood Accord's rules were absolute. If the debt, the prize, no longer existed, the hunt ended. She was no longer a target. You've cost me much, human, he said, glaring at Jack. But the Accord is satisfied for now. He turned and strode out, his soldiers following in silence. The chamber was suddenly too quiet. Holstered his pistol, letting out a slow breath. Well, that was dramatic. Jack gave him a look. You knew it could do that. Smirked faintly. I had a hunch. Lucky for all of us, the kid's braver than she looks. Sierra's voice was tired but firm. We're not done. My father's still out there. Jack nodded. Then we get him back, and maybe have a long talk about gambling away your children. They made their way out of the vault, up through the warrens, and into the fatting light of prime. The twin suns were dipping low again, painting the streets in red and gold. Sierra walked beside him, her step unsteady but determined, trailed behind, humming to himself. Jack glanced at her. So, one cycle, huh? That's what your father bet. She smiled faintly. Looks like you're stuck with me longer than that. Jack smirked. Rules are rules. They kept walking, the noise of the city rising around them. Somewhere out there, the next fight was already waiting, but for now, they were alive, and together.